Hello, I'm Gemma Atwood and I work for the Community Relations Council as well. Obviously, the Southern Government and the Assembly are in process of developing different events as to how they commemorate this centenary. And I was wondering, what might be the benefits of the process of thinking about how they do commemorate the different events, and what advice maybe would there be for future governments, given that very soon we're going to be remembering very violent recent histories, which are, will be remembered by a larger number of people, obviously. And I think someone had mentioned that maybe how we have remembered in the past hasn't been the correct way or hasn't been done properly. So I'm wondering what might be the learning from this process that could help us remember and have a positive contribution to reconciliation in the future.
So any lessons from this process really going forward for governments, North and South? Maybe you thought on that?
Well, I think we're going to learn a lot of lessons probably just by working our way through the next 10 years. I think what's happened so far, north and south of the border, for the last 4 or 5 months, I think it's been pretty positive and constructive. Now, it could well be that there are more challenging times ahead. So I think we're going to learn a lot through this process. But I suppose we want to recapitulate what I think everybody feels. Obviously we don't want it to sort of widen divisions or in any way undermine what has been achieved, recognizing that there is a lot more that needs to be achieved. But I'm constantly struck by the opportunities, and I see many examples of it happening, of sort of closing up rifts. I'll give you just a little story from Tipperary. The GAA was founded in 1884, and there were, not much more than half a dozen founding members. But one of the founding members had been forgotten. And why was he forgotten? Because he was an RIC officer. And that didn't sort of fit into the image. But anyway, I was at an unveiling of a plaque to his memory at a school. His name was Thomas St. George McCarthy. And I think he'd just been brought along to the founding meeting. But that's just a little gap that was closed, and there are lots of opportunities during this decade of centenaries to bring about, some of them maybe on a relatively small scale, sort of reconciliation, where there has been hurt, to feel where that's been recognized, and where sort of there's mutual recognition, and we're overcoming that. And I suppose the role of government is to encourage that, but to recognise that there's a lot going on of its own accord, just to provide gentle steer, not try to dictate to anybody, what they should be doing, and just making sure that obviously that things aren't going in a sort of completely adverse direction. But so far so good. There were some worries about some events that have taken place earlier this year, connected with Balmoral and so on. It all passed off very peacefully and I think there's great goodwill among people from practically every shade of opinion to make this decade of commemorations a success rather than a failure.
John, would you like to say something briefly?
I don't hear too well, so I'm not too sure I got the full gist of your question. Some remembering of recent events is a difficult process in terms of joint remembering. That, I think, has to be approached extremely carefully, because it's charged with an enormous amount of hurt and grief and anger and outrage. So one navigates one's way around that with considerable sensitivity and care. It'll be interesting to see how the new Victims Forum manages to do it, because they've brought together in that forum people from quite diverse backgrounds and diverse historical experiences. It does strike me that perhaps it has taken 100 years for us to reach a stage where we can start to talk about the past.
And on the positive side, I mean, the executive has designated 2 ministers to coordinate affairs from both sides of the political spectrum. We have a series of talks at Stormont organised by the Speaker looking at the entire decade. We have the Peter Robinson Lecture, which I know Martin's well aware of, in Dublin in March, which was the first public event of the Irish government's commemoration. So in many ways, you know, I think there's a general desire to do good rather than ill as we approach this, realising that there are elements of dynamite in Irish history, particularly from 100 years ago when there was a lot of it being imported at that particular time. Can I thank you all very much for coming, and before concluding and thanking our panel, can I just tell you that there is a sort of a short-term legacy of what we have wrought here since the month of March, in that a video of every lecture, including a video of this discussion tonight, is available on YouTube via the Community Relations Council website. So if you're interested for any purposes, personal, educational, youth club, whatever, church, you can access the series of 10 public lectures in all their detail and diversity by going on to the CRC website, going to marking anniversaries, and then going secondly to the decade of centenaries lecture videos. And some of the lecturers will see themselves as they never imagined they would see themselves, in vivid colour, expressing great angst over events of 1912 and 1916. And there it is. Can I thank our panel, Dr. John Dunlop, Mrs. Maureen Hetherington, and Dr. Martin Manser, and thank you for coming.